There's a man Phil Mickelson has called Coach for over 30 years. Not a nickname, a title Mickelson uses when he calls him his mentor, his agent, his partner, everything to me, in his own words. Steve Loy has stood beside Mickelson through every version of his career: the rise, the majors, the gambling admissions, the insider trading case, the defection to LIV Golf, when sponsors fled and longtime allies went quiet. Loy never left, but something has changed. For the first time in 30 years, Loy's name isn't just attached to Mickelson's success. It's inside the newest allegations against him, named as present in the room. And through weeks of statements, denials, and legal rebuttals from Mickelson's camp, Steve Loy has said nothing. Not a defense, not a distance, not a single word. So here's what I want to know. After 30 years of loyalty, what does silence actually mean? Drop your theory in the comments and subscribe, because this channel breaks down what the golf world won't say out loud. Because by the end of this video, you'll understand why that silence might be the loudest part of this entire story. Steve Loy was a college golf coach in the late 1980s when he first noticed a teenager tearing up amateur tournaments across the Southwest. He introduced himself, recruited him hard, and eventually convinced him to join his team at Arizona State. That teenager was Phil Mickelson. Loy coached him through 3 NCAA championships, a level of collegiate dominance that still stands as one of the great runs in college golf history. He was there before the endorsement deals, before the majors, before lefty meant anything outside junior golf circles. Back then, Loy wasn't managing a brand or protecting an investment. He was simply a coach trying to build a golf program, and Mickelson was simply a talented kid trying to make a team. This wasn't a partnership manufactured by an agency boardroom, engineered by handlers, or built around a contract. It was built on a golf course, years before either man had anything real to gain from the other. 30 years. Sit with that number for a second. Most professional partnerships in sports don't survive 30 months, let alone 30 years. Coaches get replaced, agents get dropped, athletes outgrow the people who discovered them. That's the pattern. That's what usually happens in this business. It didn't happen here. When Mickelson turned pro in 1992, he didn't look for a bigger name, a more connected agency, or a fresh start. He kept Loy, and what began as a simple coach-athlete relationship on a college campus quietly became something far more entangled, financially, professionally, personally, than almost anyone watching from the outside ever fully understood, which is exactly where this story starts to get complicated. By 1992, that college coach had become something the golf world didn't have a clean word for yet. Loy left coaching to represent Mickelson full-time, and over the following decades, their relationship stretched far past the usual boundaries of agent and client. They built businesses together, golf course ventures, corporate partnerships. Loy negotiated Mickelson's deals with the biggest names in the industry: Callaway, Rolex, KPMG, ExxonMobil, relationships that turned Mickelson into one of the highest-earning athletes in the world and Loy into one of the most powerful agents in golf. Mickelson himself has described what that relationship became, in his own words, on the record. Coach has been my mentor, my coach, my agent, my partner. Coach has been everything to me. Without him, I probably wouldn't be who I am today. That's not the language of a business arrangement. That's the language of dependency, the kind that doesn't come with an exit clause, a bond that deep only tends to go one of two ways once real pressure arrives. It snaps first, faster, and harder than anyone expected, because there was more at stake than either side let on, or it never snaps at all, no matter what gets thrown at it, because 30 years built something too load-bearing to walk away from. Golf's history is full of agents and athletes who split under far less strain than what was coming. Loy and Mickelson were about to find out which kind of bond theirs actually was. That bond would be tested again and again, and each time it held. In 2023, the golf world learned Mickelson had discussed gambling on his own performance at majors admissions. That surfaced through a separate legal case involving professional bettor Billy Walters. It was uncomfortable, it was public, and it followed Mickelson for years afterward, resurfacing anytime his name came up in the golf press. Loy stayed. Then came the fallout from that same case. Mickelson ordered to repay nearly $1 million in trading profits tied to Walter's insider trading conviction, avoiding formal charges himself only on a technicality. It was the kind of headline most business partners would quietly want distance from, the kind that gets handled by putting daylight between yourself and the client. Loy stayed close instead, and in 2022, Mickelson made the decision that cost him almost everything else. He joined LIV Golf, sponsors he'd carried for decades, corporate relationships Loy himself had spent years building, negotiating, protecting, walked away almost overnight. Longtime allies across the sport went quiet. The PGA Tour, the very institution that had helped make both men wealthy, became the enemy almost instantly. That's controversy number one Loy stood through. It would not be the last, and it wasn't even the biggest. Through the gambling admissions, the insider trading fallout, and the LIV defection, one thing never changed. Loy never issued a statement questioning Mickelson, never stepped back publicly, never let daylight show between them, even as the partnership became one of the most scrutinized in professional golf. For 30 years, that consistency looked simple. It looked like loyalty. Nothing more complicated than that. Then, in the summer of 2026, a report surfaced that didn't just describe Mickelson's conduct from a distance, it put Steve Loy in the room. That report came from veteran golf journalist Alan Shipnuck, published through Scratch Golf in June 2026. It detailed years of alleged misconduct from Mickelson built on interviews with numerous sources, and one detail stood apart from everything else in it. According to an account given to Shipnuck by Ashley Perez, then married to former tour player Pat Perez, there was a dinner at a tournament years earlier where Mickelson allegedly steered the conversation into explicit territory in front of the table. Steve Loy was named as someone present at that dinner. To be clear about what's confirmed and what isn't, Mickelson's camp has disputed multiple elements of the broader report, calling parts of it unsupported and pointing to inconsistencies in how certain claims were framed. Other elements, including a recorded phone call in which Mickelson apologized for his conduct, are acknowledged even as his team disputes the specifics of what exactly he was apologizing for. Loy's presence at the dinner itself has not been disputed by anyone involved in the story. What has never come from anywhere, not Shipnuck's report, not Mickelson's camp, not a single outlet covering this story since, is one word from Steve Loy himself. Not about that night, not about his relationship with Mickelson, not about anything in the report at all. Notice what every write-up of this story focuses on, not what Loy has said, what he hasn't. Because while attorneys drafted statements and spokespeople issued denials, the man who has called himself Mickelson's coach, agent, and partner for over 30 years, the man named as being in the room, did the one thing he had never done through any previous controversy. He said absolutely nothing, and that absence is about to get a lot harder to ignore. Because while Loy stayed quiet, Mickelson's camp did the opposite. In the weeks after the Shipnuck report published, Mickelson's spokeswoman issued a lengthy, detailed statement disputing specific claims point by point. His attorney, Tom Clare, called elements of the reporting unsupported speculation and pushed back publicly on individual allegations down to the exact wording of a single phone call. Mickelson himself, through his team, described the article as an anonymously sourced drive-by shooting. Statement after statement, argument after argument, all on the record, all attributed by name, all designed to control the narrative in real time. Ask yourself, in 30 years of being called everything to this man, has Loy ever gone this quiet before? Not during the gambling admissions, not during the insider trading case, not during LIV Golf, when sponsors fled and reporters wanted comment from everyone in Mickelson's orbit. Every previous controversy Loy weathered in full public view, standing visibly beside Mickelson, never once stepping out of frame. This is the first time he's vanished from the conversation entirely, at the exact moment his own name sits inside it. Weeks of statements from one side, 0 words from the other. Let that sit for a second. No podcast appearance, no interview accepted, no quote to a single reporter on or off the record. Not even the kind of brief, neutral line publicists write for people who simply want to stay out of a story. I wasn't aware, I don't recall anything at all. Just silence, sustained long enough, consistently enough, that it stopped looking accidental. Silence that specific, that disciplined, from someone that close to the center of it doesn't happen by chance. It happens for a reason. The question that matters now is which one. So, which reason is it? There are really only three honest possibilities, and no confirmed way to know which one is true. The first is the simplest. Loy is protecting a friendship. 30 years of loyalty doesn't just evaporate because a story gets uncomfortable. If Loy genuinely believes the man he's called family is being unfairly characterized, silence might be the only form of support he knows how to offer. Not because he has nothing to say, but because no statement would ever feel like enough. The second is more transactional. Loy's business, his agency ties, his corporate relationships, much of it built on Mickelson's name and career. A public comment in either direction creates risk. Defend him, and Loy ties his own credibility to every disputed claim in that report. Distance himself, and he undermines 30 years of positioning himself as the one person who never wavered. Silence protects the business either way, no matter which way this story eventually breaks. The third is the quietest one, and the hardest to say out loud. Loy may simply have nothing he's willing to put on the record, not because there's nothing to say, but because anything he confirms, denies, or clarifies risks pulling him further into a story he was never supposed to be part of. Remember the two ways a 30-year bond breaks under pressure. It snaps first or it never snaps at all. Here's the third option nobody considered. It doesn't break, it just goes silent. Three explanations, all plausible, none confirmed, and that's the part of this story nobody else can resolve for you, because the only person who actually knows the answer is the one person who hasn't said a word. Since the outline doesn't have a separate section G, F flows directly into the outro. Here's that final section hitting the 200-word target, 2,150 to 2,350, with CTA3 built in as requested. 30 years ago, a college coach shook hands with a teenager on a driving range, and neither of them could have known what that partnership would survive, or what it would eventually be asked to explain. Gambling admissions, an insider trading case, a tour defection that cost them both. Steve Loy stood through every single one, visibly, publicly, without hesitation. Now, at the one moment his own name sits inside the story instead of beside it, he's said nothing at all. Maybe that's loyalty. Maybe that's self-protection. Maybe it's something in between that we'll never actually get an answer to. So here's where I'll leave you. Is Steve Loy staying silent because there's nothing left to say, or because there's everything left to lose? Drop your answer in the comments below, and while you're there, tell me where you're watching from, and if there's a player or a story in golf you think deserves this same kind of breakdown. If this is the kind of story you want broken down every time the golf world goes quiet instead of loud, subscribe, because the next one's already in the works.